Welcome to Books in the Biz, the show where real-world business meets real-world results. Hosted by business strategist Dan Paulson and veteran CFO Richard Beltry, this podcast breaks down the stories, trends, and financial insights shaping today's companies. Dan brings decades of experience helping leaders simplify operations, build strong cultures, and scale with confidence. Rich adds his deep financial expertise from guiding organizations across healthcare, construction, logistics, and professional services. Together, they dig into what's really happening behind the numbers and what it means for owners, executives, and anyone trying to grow a stronger, smarter business. This is practical conversation, real talk, and tools you can use right now. Welcome to Books in the Biz.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Rich, how are you doing today?
I am okay today. How are you?
You are okay. I am just fine.
Just fine.
Here we are, another cold winter day, and this is round 2 of a brand new year. And you were kind enough last week to share an article in the Wall Street Journal with me, and so the Wall Street Journal one was behind a paywall, of course, and couldn't be nice enough to just kind of show what's going on, but I thought this was very interesting as well, and I think there's both operational and other implications financially that we've got to deal with. So I just kind of pulled up Apple News to show some of the different talks out there, but two different ones I want to point to on here. Business Outsider, very similar to what Wall Street Journal posted. Ford is desperate for mechanics and giving free tools, Carhartt gear, and I believe in another article, if not this one, they also talk about where they're giving scholarships. What's even more interesting is if you look further down here at the New York Post article, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, Ford CEO Jim Farley laments that he can't fill 5,000 mechanics jobs at $120,000 per year. And I seem to remember the Wall Street Journal saying something like $160,000 per year.
Yep.
So I'm going to click on the Post one here. But 5,000 jobs. That's, I believe this last month, the unemployment rate went up slightly, a minor tick up, but it did go up. And to me, this is somewhat of a flag that, are we training people for the needed positions, or are schools just kind of pushing people through and a lot of you figure it out after you leave here type stuff? What's your thoughts?
Obviously it's concerning, right?
Yes.
Because we've talked about this before, that the workforce has kind of been pushed, vast majority have been pushed towards college and four-year education, and there's fewer people available for, trade type jobs, mechanic type jobs. And this is now becoming where it's coming out into the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming out from the head of Ford, because my first reaction is, well, Ford itself doesn't own the dealerships, so it's not really Ford. And then I'm like, but I'm not going to buy a Ford if I can't get the car serviced. So it does have an effect on the CEO. Right. So there's a flow here of problem for the CEO. And I don't know that he can fix it by himself or even at Ford headquarters, right? I think this is an industry problem, and this is the first time that we're able to say that this is the indicator of an industry problem.
Yep. And yeah, I think that's why I was so interested in this article when you approached me on it. I thought why this would be a good one to start with this time around, because Ford needs 5,000 mechanics, but it's not just Ford. There's GM, there's Toyota,
Mhm.
there's Nissan, there's Dodge, Ram. If
Yeah.
Ford needs 5,000, what do the other ones need? I'm guessing the number is going to be similar, pretty close. And then you're still talking about the independents in the industry. I was trying to get Jay Gonanen on here from Wrenchway because, of course, this is in his wheelhouse, and I think maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll try and get him back on to talk in more detail about
Sure.
some of the things that they're trying to do to get people in here. But I see decades of an issue. I don't see a quick fix on any of this right now, and I'm not sure where you're at from a financial point of view. But as you start talking about paying people, uh, you know, good six-figure salaries to start with, and then also buying equipment for them, because that's from what I heard from Jay and what I heard from some others, including my brother, who is a mechanic, is it can cost you anywhere to, because you buy your own tools, it can cost you anywhere from $10,000 on the low end to $20,000 to $30,000 on the. So you got somebody who's coming out of technical college or school with service tech training, and the first big purchase they have to make is the equipment they need to use, because that's the stuff they take with them wherever they're working. So this has been a huge issue in the industry, is most of that cost has been pushed on the student to come up with.
Mhm.
And would you, it's almost as bad as going to college, right? If you're going to college and spending 20 grand a year to go to college, but you don't want to go to college and this is your choice, but now you got to come up with, we'll say 5 to 10 grand to go to tech school. Then after you graduate from there, you got to come up with another 20 grand to actually go to the job that you've now been trained for. That's pretty deterring for some people who might be more interested in going into this line of work.
I think there's a little bit more to it even, right? When you
Mhm.
when you think about the policy shift years ago has now pushed people towards going to the 4-year college or whatever.
Right.
And you know, these sound like great ideas of how you can promote and give some money towards it and get people out of, that sort of mindset. But how long does it take?
Hmm.
Like how if you've been doing it this way for 40, 50 years and then you come out today and say, "Hey, we're going to change policy." Does it
Yep.
take you 40 to 50 years to reverse it and
Hmm.
send it back the other way? Um, and who's going to reverse? Like they've all been the people in school now are all geared towards I'm supposed to go to school. And now you're going to tell them, well, guess what? You don't have to go to school. You could have gone
Right.
this way and gotten, better off. But there's just so much of that flip flop
Yeah.
that you can throw into that conversation. And I'll throw this out there. I realize we're talking mostly on the trade stuff because it's very, very key for the trade stuff, if you ask me.
Right.
But the accountants did this too.
Hmm.
Okay, they are all changing the laws state by state. I think the last number I saw was 22. New Jersey was one of the most recent that they have changed their law for who can become a CPA, and now there's two paths to get to CPA. One of those paths is the one that I passed. How I got my certification 25, 30 years ago. Okay, so they've just basically reversed back to 25, 30 years ago, and now they're saying, well, now it's okay. We'll go back to the way it was before. We've been in every newspaper, every publication as we don't have enough accountants, and you changed this law 25 plus years ago. Now you're trying to flip it back, like now it's okay. Well, who are you going to flip back now? And how long is it going to take to re-energize a profession? So essentially, it's a parallel conversation to what we're talking about in this article.
Yeah.
How long is it going to take for you to replenish the fact that you're telling you're this many people short and you have this many people retiring? You don't really have a plan. You just, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks.
Yeah. And that's that's I think the biggest challenge with this. Whenever you know, I'll say this is probably started as more of a government issue because they want to push a lot of people to a 4-year degree. Well, you know, that was fine, and I've even told people this. You know, back in the 90s when I graduated from college, it made sense because the degree paid for itself. You could get
Yeah.
affordable, good degree that when you graduate with college, you could actually use and would actually you'd make more money than you'd have to pay in what it costs you to get that degree. And what I see now is, you know, 40 years later, we push people to this. So, you know, we've got parents and in some cases grandparents who are told you have to go to college. Well, you know, the common theme I hear from a lot of parents is like, we need people in the trades. We need people in, you know, we need mechanics because AI is not going to fix any of that stuff. And at the same point, my kid's going to go to school, going to get a 4-year degree. Well, you're not helping the problem here. You're tied into the old way of thinking, which is everyone has to get a 4-year degree.
Mhm.
And now we have situations, for example, you know, if you can get somebody to pay for your tools, pay for your clothing, potentially pay for your education, and on top of it, when you graduate, you're already going to start at a 6-figure income, which is going to put you within the top, 5% of the population out there right now. Why wouldn't you allow your kid to do that if that's what they want to do? If they want to be a grease monkey, I'm like, go ahead, be one.
Yeah.
If you want to go into construction, do that because you're going to be better off long term.
Yeah, I think again, I think it's a big reversal of the policy, you know, and I think that we should be talking about you have a choice. And I think it started, I don't necessarily think it's because this CEO of Ford is now making, you know, making mainstream news. People have already been talking about it because, you know, the cost of the 4-year degree, I think you mentioned it before, the cost of the 4-year degree is pushing people out. And then I saw somebody who graduated with my daughter 5 years ago as the customer service person at the local food store.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so how is he paying back the college education as the customer service person at a food store?
Yep.
You
And how
know,
long is he going to be paying on that?
and
That's the
how
real.
long does that go? Yeah. So, you know, on top of that, let's add a little bit more to the Ford problem. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Cars are not cars anymore. Cars are not what they were when we were kids. And it was a combustion engine and it was something you could work on in your driveway if you wanted to. Now, you know, one of these articles called them rolling computers,
Uh-huh.
right? So, does the mechanic at Ford have to be somebody with a 4-year degree who can actually figure out computers and problem solve? And you know, I'm not really sure we have a logical argument coming from somebody like Ford. You know, they're designing cars to be more fuel efficient, more, you know, uh, electronic, more computer, you know, generated.
Yeah.
And, you know, half the time I think they don't consider the fact that the cars will need repairs at some point, you know, and they design them based on the design and the cost, and they don't design them on the fact that somebody wants to change the oil, they have to take the engine out of the car. You know, I mean, it gets a little ridiculous that fuel efficiency gets you to the point where your head gasket goes at $85,000.
Right.
Yes, it happened. You know,
Well, here's where I will make an argument for the other side. I think, yes, and this is deliberate. And here's the example. And if I had time, I'd pull up the article. Unfortunately, we don't have a back crew that can go out and do the research on us. But I saw an article that BMW changed their to be BMW specific. So you need a specific tool that only BMW allows you to have to work on your vehicle. And the reason they did that is they got tired of people fixing their own cars. They wanted to push more stuff to the dealership. And I think that's also part of why stuff is going to electronics. So again, my experience, as you know, I'm a car guy, and a lot of people on here know, uh, GM to more or less standardize how systems in their cars are updated and what can be done to that car. So by locking down the electronic system or the computer system on the car to only work with their platform, you prevent people from being able to do performance upgrades or any changes to it. Basically, you have to go to a tech, or if you do any changes, it A, voids your warranty, B, shuts down your car, which, by the way, is sometimes a problem now with all these computers in it, or C, turns you off and pushes you back into an older vehicle. There's a lot of people out there who already can't fix their cars. They just
Yeah.
don't have the mechanical wherewithal because, they didn't grow up on a farm, or they didn't grow up in the garage with a parent who was busy, wrenching on vehicles. So that's all changed already. But now you're almost setting yourself up to a situation where the only way you can get an oil change, or the only way you can do minor maintenance, is you have to take it to a dealership and spend, hundreds of dollars. I want to say average hourly cost is somewhere around $150 or $175 an hour for the dealer mechanic to work on it, with a minimum 1 hour charge plus parts, so it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Unreal. Yeah, when I had my issue with the car, they had the car for weeks,
Yes.
weeks, and just to get to it. I think at the end of the day, though, I don't think they had more than 20 labor hours on the car. It was just there for weeks, just
Right.
because, you had backlog and you had parts and you had, things that had to get done and farmed out to somebody else to get it done. And you're sitting there saying, I don't know where this is going to end.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can definitely see the issue, you know, at the same time, it's of your own doing. So how about we figure out how to fix it in a faster way for the consumer, not for your reputation.
Yep. So now, looking at it from a financial perspective, let's take a look at it from a CFO point of view. You are now working for Ford or working with Ford, and this is a problem you're trying to solve. Based on some of the options they've thrown out, what would you agree to, or what would you do, and how do you manage that cost from I'll say, the franchise level and the private industry level? Because here's the thing, most auto mechanics don't work for Ford or GM or whatnot. They work in a shop in a town that's, run privately. They're not tied into the franchise. So this, to me, is where the biggest pinch is going to happen. Is those people need mechanics. They don't have the luxury of Ford backing them up and paying, these six-figure incomes. So what do you do about that?
Well, interesting, very interesting, because I don't think I have enough data to be able to give you too specific an answer.
Sure.
But I think that, my curiosity here is what's the end game? If you realize that repairs and maintenance is a problem, and I can guarantee you from what I saw, it's a problem for the dealerships. So then how do you help the dealerships? Because the dealerships are independent.
Mm-hmm.
What, if your only thing here is you're going to throw, a scholarship program out there or offer to buy some tools, when I saw the number that I think it threw out there, I'm looking at it and I'm going, that really feels pretty small for billions of dollars going into Ford.
Right.
The amount of money they're throwing at it is tiny. But if this is that big of an issue where I go in and I drop off the car at a dealership and essentially they look at me and go, well, we're not really willing to fix it. We're just going to replace your entire engine. And so the cost is way over the ceiling, but yeah, your hours putting that in is probably tiny because
Mm-hmm.
what you're telling me. So, you're not really, by throwing money into the mechanics pool for scholarships and tools, I don't feel like you're solving the real problem.
Right.
I feel like you're solving possibly the labor number problem, but you're not fixing the customer experience, because now what? I go down there and I've got $120,000 or $160,000 new guy working on my vehicle, and maybe he can't work on my vehicle because you set it up where the vehicles are so complicated that he may not even know what the problem is.
Yeah.
So I realize maybe I'm rambling a little bit there, but I just feel like the number that they threw out there that they're investing in trying to fix the problem doesn't sound like it's big enough to fix a 5 or 6 thousand mechanic shortage
Mm.
just on his uh, just on his company. Just now, like you said, it's all the industry. It's
Right.
the whole thing. Multiply that times 6, 7, 8 big brands. Um, And so I think there's more money that has to be spent. I think there's almost a re-education that has to be spent. Who knows how long that would take? And I think that, you know, put the money into it. Put the money into this is what's going to solve our problem. I mean, my first reaction was, do the dealerships have to be, assisted to go out and buy some of these independent repair shops? That's a fast way to get people. It's a fast way to get experienced people who know what the problems are. And, I don't, I have personal opinion. I don't want to go to the dealerships anymore. I
Yeah.
absolutely got turned off 100%. And I was dealing with a local guy who, number one, fixed my problem. Number two, was 100% honest and, did it with a reasonable price. And I'd give him all my oil changes and every maintenance at this point because, Dodge was my brand. Dodge drove me into this guy's shop.
Right. Yep. And so it's interesting. You're talking about investing more money, which I agree with. And my understanding as somewhat limited, but again, because I kind of deal with the industry maybe a little bit more because of the toys I play around with. That the mechanics now, like you said, they need to be taught a completely different skill beyond just the wrenching side of things. There also is now this computer side of things that they have to understand, which to some degree is an advantage for new people coming into the industry because most of them have been raised on computers their entire life. They understand how they work.
Yep.
There is a basically there is a module you plug into the computer on the car that gives you what's called an error code, and depending upon that error code can give you 3 4 5 different possible problems that you need to look into. It might highlight what the more likely problem is, but it might also point out some other potential issues as well. How do I know this? Because I went through a very similar problem to what you did with my Dodge. Well, actually, my Jeep
Yep.
that our son uses. And we were trying to figure out what was going on with it. And my brother, who again is a mechanic, we took it to his shop and he's like, well, we think it's this, but it could also be this, this, and this. So we're going to try this first, and that being the lowest cost option, and see if that addresses it. If that doesn't address it, bring it back in, and then we got to go to the next, and so on. And I'm seeing that more and more, where in the past when it was just a mechanical issue, you didn't have to deal with the umpteen different computers that are in the car. You could just deal with the physical mechanical problem that's not working. And in most cases, a good mechanic back in the day could listen to what the engine was doing and go, it's this problem. Fix
Yep.
this, that takes care of it, and it costs this much.
Right.
Nowadays, there's diagnosis costs, there's all this other stuff that goes into it. So I agree with you that you need to spend more money to get people trained up and get them prepared for it. And possibly, though it concerns me a little bit that they would go out and try and consolidate a lot of the independent dealerships, but that seems to be the world we're coming to. It's still going to cost us more to fix our cars. That's the thing that sucks.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that Ford, the Ford CEO, is the guy out on the news. He's
Yep.
the guy making this statement. If the problem is at your dealerships, why are you the face of the problem on the repairs and maintenance side? Because, to a certain extent, you're still involved, right? You're warrantying the vehicle. So I
Hmm.
get that you have some degree of connection to it, but the independents are the ones who need the support. They would be the ones that I would want to see. Well, how can these guys get the funds to go get an acquisition going on an independent, an independent repair shop?
Yep.
Or is there a better way at that level to get the independent repair shop to be able to handle the problems that you have. Outsourcing a lot of times is cheaper than building it all yourself. And I
Agreed.
think a lot of these independents probably already have some of this stuff figured out, and they're not complaining because they've figured out how to figure it out. They've figured out how to move forward so that they can fix the stuff that goes to the dealership and the dealership fails. And then
Yeah.
everybody has to find that independent. So is your problem really that you have to build up your own, or do you just have to support the fact that your stuff can be fixed by others, you know?
Yeah, what I'm seeing, at least with the independents, where I think and this is kind of more the operational potential solution, is really communication and culture are the two things that I see. Part of this is because I am now working with a auto shop, and when I'm talking with their service managers, the owners, and a lot of these are family run businesses, it might be second or third generation even. Yeah, they got some of the systems figured out, but there's a lot, again, they're kind of doing that old school way. So it worked back 20 years ago. Now it's gotten more complicated. Now they're running into some problems. But that's, again, a lot of that stems from communication between the service managers, the customers, the owners, is kind of the trifecta there. But then it's also putting in place the systems and processes and making them consistent. So that's where it'll be interesting when we get Jay back on, because he can talk a little bit more about that. And I think that would be where he would probably even share some agreement, where systematizing your shop allows you to then go look at other shops and consolidate that way. Because the more consistent you are in your operation, the more you can replicate that. And I do agree with you, service level at many franchise dealerships for the major brands, they're really structured to make money and not always concerned about customer care. Some are better than others, obviously, but it's really a push to see how much you can get in the door, because they know they don't make as much on the car sales, but they make a lot of money on the service side of things and the parts side of things. And that's really where the goal is. I'll sell you the car, I'll sell you the warranty, and then we get you on the warranty work. And after the warranty work's done, we get you on the other repairs that need to be done after that, assuming you're keeping your vehicle for longer than 5 to 6 years at this point. Now coming up on 7 in most cases.
Yeah. I again, not enough data for me to really kind of dive in further.
Sure.
A lot of auto guys and you would probably tell me this might not work, but it's the piece that I'm seeing right now. It's the piece that I think you have to explore, because again, if he wants to rebuild the repairs and maintenance side, I don't see it being a fast fix.
Right.
So
Yep.
the loss of reputation comes down to how much that's going to cost you. Is it worth paying, um, you know, to fund the acquisitions as opposed to trying to rebuild? And how much do all these costs, and how much do the options actually, you know, how much do they cost you? And then you
Right.
can figure out what's the most logical step to move into.
Yeah, I was just, and as you're talking about that, I was just thinking, why you asked the question, well, why is Ford the face of this, and why is this coming up now? I think Ford is the face of it because they're probably getting feedback from their franchises that, hey, we can't get enough people here. You are making these cars more complicated and also require more service work to come to the dealership. What are you doing about that? So to me, that's probably why Farley is now being put out in front of people, because he's a recognized person, he's a recognized brand. I would actually like to see that more, kind of like Mike Rowe does. Mike Rowe really was kind of one of the first ones to, on a high level or on a broad scale, raise the flag that we need more people in things like the trades and automotive, and more hands-on type individuals. And he even talks about you got to create the right culture and all this other stuff too. So I think that's where we're starting to see some bigger names speak out about this, because they recognize that there is a problem, but at the same point they got to start doing stuff to address it. And to me, from my perspective, perspective, that's getting some of these dealerships or some of these tech shops in schools and getting them to talk again about the trades and about other opportunities that they have that go beyond that 4-year degree. Because as you pointed out, for 40 years, we've been beating it into people's heads that you need a bachelor's degree at the very least, and often you need a master's at, beyond that. And it's going to probably take another 10, 20, 30 years to finally pivot the other direction. You just hope you haven't swung the ship around too far that, you're now back in the same problem somewhere else. Yep. So I see that as the challenge that we all have is, by the time we catch up, we've already probably gone too far. So how do you measure that is really going to be the future of how we get the right people in the right spots. But yeah, we need to move people back to a direction where it's not all about going to get a 4-year degree. There's other opportunities out there that are far more lucrative right now. And if you're even thinking about graduating from high school, you probably should look at some other opportunities.
Yep.
So, Rich, if these companies, especially these family-run shops, or anybody wants to figure out how to be more profitable, how to build a strategy around growth and scalability, how should they contact us?
You can always send me an email at rich@xcxo.net.
And you can do the same for me, except I'm Dan at xcxo.net. Rich, this has been an interesting subject, and we'll have to get Jay on here because I'm sure he can share a lot of insight based on his experience on what's going on here. But until next week, we will see you later.
All right.
All right, here we go.
Thanks for listening to Books and the Biz. If today's conversation sparked new ideas for your company, the team at XCXO can help you turn those ideas into action. XCXO brings together seasoned executives, fractional CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and CXOs who step into your business with the experience, strategy, and leadership to drive real results. Whether you're trying to scale, strengthen operations, improve profitability, or prepare for transition, our experts help you move faster and lead with confidence. To learn more or start a conversation, visit xcxo.net. That's xcxo.net, your shortcut to stronger leadership and a better run business. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Books and the Biz.